is quite interesting because we've just changed our whole program. So I don't know what you're going to get. But
neither do we.
What I know is it's going to be good. I am very happy to be here. My name is Ellen Ruffin, and I am the newly retired curator of the DeGrumman Children's Literature Collection at the University of Southern Mississippi. I'm teasing him. Okay. No, I'm serious. But what I want to do is find my notes and I want to give you just an overview of Carmen Agra Deedy. How many of you know some of Carmen's stories or books? Oh, yeah. So you're here. You wouldn't miss it, right? That's how I feel. Carmen is an award-winning author of 15 books, so she does storytelling and writing for young readers, of course, including my granddaughter's very favorite, The Rooster Who Would Not Be Quiet. Carmen, just for me, how does a rooster crow?
The onomatopoeic sound in Spanish is kikiriki.
Kikiriki. My daughter has mastered it. And then, interesting books like Martina the Beautiful Cockroach. I think you guys would love that book.
It's a Pura Belpré.
It won a Pura Belpré, which is a national honor for an award for Hispanic authors, illustrators, right?
For the books, yes.
For the books.
For the books, yeah.
So, yes, thank you for helping me with this introduction. But the most interesting thing, I could go on and on about Carmen, and you can look her up, and you can even go on YouTube and see some of her Library of Congress conversations that she has, and they're wonderful. She made use of the internet during the pandemic because you had to, right? So it's a real treat for us. Anyway, she also has been an Emmy award-winning.
They don't care.
I'm impressed with this. It's something I didn't know.
Do you people know how to Google? There you have it.
Okay, so the bottom line is I'm not going to talk anymore because I want her to talk, right? We're here for Carmen Agra Deedy, and what a joy it is to have her with us today.
Thank you, my dear friend. Hola. That was so pitiful. You all, we must make up in enthusiasm what we lack in capacity. Hola.
Hola.
All right, we're Mississippi, so it's hola, y'all.
Hola, y'all.
So I really was not intending to cut off Ellen because I think she's wonderful, and I was not trying to be disrespectful, but the truth is, most of us go to sleep during introductions, even the finest introductions, and I am not that fascinating. What I am is someone who writes for children and began on that path by telling stories. I told stories initially in the more traditional fashion in which I learned the stories from my father, from our family, from our community. I'm not going to do a David Copperfield, I was born, but I will tell you, when I was 3, my family emigrated from Cuba. We were refugees from under the brand spanking new John F. Kennedy Cuban Refugee Act. The revolution was in '59. We left December of '63. We went to Mexico, where we stayed, and I'm about to tell you that story. Had a very brief stay, and that's all I'll say now, and you'll see in a minute. It's still brief in the story, but it's worth a mention. And we ended up not in Miami, Florida, but in Decatur, Georgia. Oh no, they didn't speak Spanish in Decatur in 1964, y'all. They didn't really speak English in Decatur in 1964, Ellen. But they took us in, over 100 refugee families. And the book that I'll be signing later today, and the children's panel I'll be on, seems so unlikely a match to that story. It's about a wombat who opens its doors to a lot of animals during a fire. It's dedicated to the First Baptist Church of Decatur, who from that time to this has been a very progressive church and is still helping refugees and still helping immigrants. So now you know a little bit about me. Why children? Why write for children? So I'm going to throw in one or two other things because you have to look a bit to find this one. I have dyslexia. It wasn't diagnosed until I was 28, and I marched myself to a fine psychologist in Atlanta, Georgia, and said, fix it. I don't know what it is, but you got to help me fix it. My dyslexia is less visual than it is auditory, so I don't hear phonemes clearly. Tomato, volcano. If you're in the back of the classroom, to me, same word. That makes it difficult then when you're trying to sound out words and understand the sounds of words. Don't worry, I did fine. If you want to read more about it, you may go, if you wish, to the Yale Center for Dyslexia website, and you'll see more of my story there. And many other people's, much more fascinating even, trust me, than my own. So, second language speaker and dyslexic does good. How in the world? I'm sort of a factory working author. By that, like my father, who worked in a steel mill when he came here, I put on my author uniform and I visit between 100 and 120 schools a year. I have 17 books now. But, and the new one that's coming next year is the story I'm about to tell you, which I will now tell you and quit talking about this stuff. Oh, one thing. This story is really meant for me to tell you while standing more. So, we're okay? All right. Manicero se va. That was the song of the Peanut Man. His name was Emilio. I was a 3-year-old child in my cuna, my crib, standing up by the window, la ventana. As soon as I heard his voice, a red velvet ribbon that wound its way through that colonial city, Emilio and his mule, money. It was his last round through the city. Manicero. I would shove open those shutters, lean into my crib, and as soon as he turned the corner, I would start waving that blanket, a signal of surrender. It was bedtime now. There was an old lamppost, an old gas lamp, one of the last working gas lamps from another era. It cast a perfect amber glow on those cobblestone streets. And like an actor in a play, Antonio would step into that light, look up at me, and he would say, "Hasta mañana, Carmen." Good night, Carmen. He knew every kid in our neighborhood by name, and we all knew Emilio, the Peanut Man, el manicero. But it wasn't time for good night yet. So I did something that my sister taught me how to do. My sister was 7 years older. She still is. Life is ultimately fair. I leaned down and I went, first he clutched his chest. He staggered back. He looked at the mule. It was Emilio, not the mule. He looked back at me and he did the most wonderful thing. Every single night. And then, hasta mañana, good night. Hasta mañana, and then he tugged on the mule's bit. They stepped out of the light into the shadows, over the crest of the hill. Manicero. And when he vanished, I would fall back into the sheets, the cool sheets on my crib. And that briny salt air off Havana Harbor would wash in. Money. And that's what I remember. Until one day. And we always know in a story that things are going to take a dog-leg turn, don't we? When we hear until one day. My father had said goodnight, my sister was in her room, and Mommy, who had already said goodnight to me, came back. It's never good when they come back. Right, kid? Say, you all kind of remember, they know. If I were talking to 3rd and 4th, 5th graders, they go, never! It is never good when they come back in your room. My mom put her arms around me and she said, Carmita, nos vamos para los Estados Unidos. We are leaving for the United States. ¿Cuándo? When? Mañana. You know that one. Tomorrow. Mommy. And she started to walk away. ¿Cuándo volvemos? When are we coming back home? And the woman in my life who knew absolutely everything about this world and the next said, no sé. I don't know. And then she walked away because my father was calling her. No sé. No sé. No sé. And then, you know, when you're a little child and the world is suddenly very, very, very big. And I started that thing where you hiccup and then your head starts to jerk over. Money. I knew who had time for me. I whipped around in that crib. I leaned into that railing till my ribs ached. This time I shoved those shutters open and they clanged in protest. And I saw Emilio and his mule, Money, as soon as he stepped in the light. Hasta mañana, Carmen. Good night, Carmen. No hasta mañana. Not good night, not yet. We had business to conduct. Emilio, nos vamos a los Estados Unidos. We're leaving for the United States. ¿Cuándo? When? Mañana. He must have heard that sob or two, and he said, Carmen, no. Te gustará tu nuevo país. You'll like your new country. Tienen comida, libertad, béisbol. They have food, freedom, baseball. Baseball. Now there's one thing every Cuban on this planet can agree on. It's the finest sport ever created. Even in the middle of a revolution when people were dying left and right and being imprisoned left and right, and there were tortures going on in this city, which is a horrible thing to bring up in this point in the story, but it was true. You could hear people screaming from the Motor Castle from our house. Even then, people found relief in little green patches of, grass in the parks or out on the street, pickup games. My father taught me to love baseball, and we loved Los Almandares. That was my dad's team, and my mom's, unless she was mad at my dad. And then there was a quiet moment when we just watched each other. This old man, by the way, he had skin like old, wrinkled up, dried tobacco leaves that had been browned under a Cuban sun. He had no teeth. He had this wonderful old campesino. My father still wore it to his lying day, the hat from the country. And he said, Carmen, hasta mañana. Adiós. Pero no te olvides del viejo Emilio. Goodbye, but don't forget your old friend Emilio. Never. I could never. And I watched him, manicero. And this time I waited until I couldn't hear him anymore. And the next day we left Cuba on an old DC-3. Remember those old planes? They were very reliable. They were built for 50 years. We didn't come here, as I told you earlier, we went to Mexico. City of Mexico, Mexico. We were very lucky. We had cousins we'd never met. Generations had passed in Mexico between my mother's family and those cousins who they'd never met, but they had paid for our tickets. And we had a little tiny apartment and a little money. So in the short time we were there, 2 months, waiting for visas, we had 1 meal a day. Well, my sister and I did. My parents, I don't know what they subsisted on. They ate very little, but every day we would walk through Chapultepec Park to the American Embassy. And one day something wonderful happened. I'll tell you why it's wonderful in a second. We were going through Chapultepec. We always took the same route because my father loved flowers. He was an old countryman, campesino. He loved anything from the earth. And so we were walking, and my mother said, let's go a different way. So the road forked. And this time, the path to the embassy was a little longer, but it took us along a route where there were many Mexican ladies sitting along the ground, probably a half dozen of them or more, and they were making tortillas over a fire. And if you've ever been to Mexico, you can still see this. It's wonderful. And as we were walking, my mother says I did this. I don't remember this. But I am told that I ran to the woman, I tapped her on the shoulder and went. My mother was horrified, of course, because, and so she runs to the woman and says, no, señora, no hay dinero, no hay dinero. I don't need to translate that, do I? And the woman does this marvelous thing. And this I do remember. It's one mother to another. It's a dismissive, not even a... She takes a tortilla, she puts queso fresco in it, she rolls it up and gives it to me. And my sister comes running up, who's 10, by the way, and goes... And after that day, we started taking the same route to the embassy. My parents would inspect the foliage, and my sister and I would edge our way up to these women, and they would feed us. It would be fast forward many, many, many decades when I became a young author, and I started going to communities with many, many children from Mexico. And I would see their faces, and I would tell them stories, and I knew that it was a part of that circle of life, of giving back again. Right, so we left Mexico. We went to Miami. We didn't stay there. We had cousins in Decatur. You know Jimmy Buffett? Everybody's got a cousin in Miami. Turns out we had some in Decatur. We went to Decatur, Georgia. My father went to work at a steel mill. My sister went to school. I stayed home with my mother. But that first night, my father had sealed all of the windows with docky tape. That slick, silvery, gridded tape that is used for so many things here. Well, they used clear plastic, my mother's cousin and my father, and my father, Carlos, and Rey, made sure that no more of that cold, because it was February, that cold air would seep through. And it doesn't seem like it would be that cold, but we were from the Caribbean. I haven't been warm since 1964. Well, anyway, I knew that's why we couldn't hear the Peanut Man sing. But spring came, as spring does in the South, with forsythias and azaleas and dogwoods and that riot of color, and the pollen, the children out there making pollen angels in the middle of the street. And off came the tape, and the windows were open, and that night there was no Peanut Man singing, nor the night after that, nor the night after that, nor the night after that. Time passed. I made friends. I learned a wobbly sort of English, and I started school. And despite my vow, my fervent vow, I forgot all about the Peanut Man. But why would I tell you this story if there wasn't something else? I turned 6 that fall. We'd been listening to the radio for 3 years, my father and I. We'd been listening to American baseball, on a radio shaped like a church window with a hunting scene behind glass and a little cameo right in the center. Our man was number 44. Anybody here? The Minnesota Braves had just come to Atlanta. They were now, or the Milwaukee Braves, they were now the Atlanta Braves. Hammer and Hank Aaron. Henry Aaron was number 44, and I would do my dance. Harry, he's my man. If he can't do it, no one can. And my sister would say, you're an idiot. Yes, so are you. Henry, he's my man if he can. Your aspersions cast me nothing. They bounce off of me because it was baseball. And then that week, when I turned 6, that September, I came home from school, and my father was outside of our little house. We lived in an attic apartment. And my father was never home during the day. Anytime. Daylight, winter, summer, spring. And I ran up, Bobby, what are you doing? Someone died. No one died. You are just like your mother. Thank you, no. Listen, your birthday is this week, eh? And he reached down to his pocket. And when those two things went together, your birthday is this week, along with that movement, I knew that there was some treasure. And out of that pocket, with a little steel silt and some lint, came 2 tickets to the Fulton County, brand new Fulton County Stadium. 2 tickets to baseball, to see the Braves, to see Henry Aaron, Hank. Bobby, we're gonna see it. Yeah, I know. I started tugging on his arm. No, Carmen, it's next week. That's forever. And my wise father said, waiting is part of life. I hate life. Stop it, come on. We went inside, but I was right, it did take forever, and if you can take yourself back to your young self, you'll remember how long it is. When you're waiting for your birthday or vacation or some other glorious thing. The day came, my mother stood outside with my sister and waved goodbye and said the predictable, almost perfunctory things. Don't forget the tickets, don't forget your money, don't lose the kid, I'm not making another one, okay? And Poppy, never mind. And then my father said, come on, we're going to have a great time. He had borrowed an old Studebaker from his cousin. He wheeled that old car, and the big Michelin tire spat out the pebbles from that driveway. We picked up Ponce de Leon. They call it Ponce de Leon in Georgia. And we arrived at the stadium. As soon as we went in, we went through that turnstile. I tried it both ways, because you always do when you're a kid. Well, you don't know about the world. It's very sneaky. And as soon as we walked in, how many of you have been to a baseball game in the heat? Okay, so you've smelled one. It's a miasma of scents. The toilets had overflowed. Someone had spilled beer. Some of the hot dogs had clearly gone a bit rancid. And as we walked down that tunnel and joined, because it's a big circle, it used to be this huge lifesaver. The smell was overwhelming. I looked at my father and said, Bubby, it smells terrible. He said, no, it's okay. It's not okay. It stinks. People were jostling each other and they were sweating. It was a hot day, like today. It wasn't hot, it's the South. It was malarial. And my father said, it's humanity. Humanity, it stinks. Stop. He picked me up. I was still holding my nose. I had my hand clamped on it. And he looked me in the eye and he said, Carmen, yes. Baseball, she's a lot like life. She smells, yes. And if you can stand the smell, said my wise father, you're going to love the game. Let's do it. Let's do it, big guy. Come on. Okay. He threw me over his shoulders like a sack of mangoes. And up the steps we went to the highest seats, cheap seats, we were poor. We got up to those seats, way up there. Whew, you could see the entire field. The green grass, the crisp white lines, the men in the bullpen. My father now had turned me over and I was sitting on his shoulder. And all of a sudden the crowd had gone insane. People were cheering and wolf whistling. Probably I can't see. He moved, held me higher. Number 44, Hammer and Hank Aaron had just walked onto the field. A man with skin like tobacco leaves, browned under a Georgia sun. Bobby, I know. And then I slid down. We went to find our seats, and as my father sat, I heard him. I almost missed him in that din of the crowd. You don't hear this at home on the radio. Turns out you have to go into the big, smelly world to hear it. Peanuts, get your peanuts, red hot, right here. Step right up, peanuts. Bobby! I shouted to my father. He whipped around on the heel of his shoe and he said, Papi, mira, un manicero. They got a peanut man. The baseball park. So that's where they kept him. Who knew? And he said, do you want some peanuts? I want 10 bags. How about one? One is good. Get him, Pop, get him. The man was making his way through the crowd. My father waved to him, and then he found the steps and took them 2 and 3 at a time. I know who you're expecting, okay? I know, because I know it's who I want it to be, but this is a real story. It wasn't my old, beautiful Emilio with not a tooth in his head. This man was tall and lean. He had blonde hair and crystal blue eyes. He had pearly milk teeth. He had a paper hat, ribbons around his neck, and a box filled with red and white striped bags, all warm and oily and bursting with peanuts. He was fast, and he was young, and he was kind of good looking. I was 6, but I was catching on. When he reached my father, an olive hand exchanged money with a white hand with the kind of trade that had happened for centuries. And I was given a brown, oily paper bag. And as my father found his seat, I leaned down and inhaled, and that bag smelled just like home. Home 1,000 miles away. We all know the olfactory sense is the greatest trigger to memory. A fat tear made its way along the side of my nose. I looked around because when you're 6 or 66, you know when people seeing this. But the peanut man saw it. He was putting the money away and fixing the box. He said, you all right, baby girl? My name is no baby girl. My name is Carmen. Carmen. No, señor, no, Carmen. Carmen. He threw his head back. Well, I'm Big D. You're a funny little kid. You're a funny white man. Now he roared. He said, where are you from? Cuba. Cuba? Oh, you've had a little trouble down there. I did not do it. Oh, that's good to know. I had a friend. And just like that, I remembered. He was what, sugar? You understand it had to be done. That man froze. I'm telling you, he could have turned into a pillar of salt right there. He looked at me. People turned. A few people whispered. My father stood up to speak. That man looked around, looked at me, and did the most wonderful thing. Hot dog! No, hot dog's the other guy. I'm Peanuts, remember? See you in the funny papers. Peanuts, get your peanuts, red hot. Hey, mister, I'd like some peanuts. I'm coming. Keep your head on. Talking to my girlfriend. Oh. But as he slipped away, my father ran up and said, Carmen, What are you doing? The game is starting. Oh, he'd missed the whole thing, maybe. We found our seats that day, and I swear, on a southerly wind, I heard, peanuts, get your peanuts, red hot right here, step right, intermingled with money. And for one shining moment, I was home again.
Did anybody else tear up? I know, it's too much. So Carmen, that was not true.
Yes.
That's what happened.
Yes. You create dialogue that you don't remember. You can go back and ask your parent, do you remember what you said? Or you can remember, but that's the construction of story. But yes, I had a peanut man in Cuba, and his name was Emilio, and we would play this game that my sister told me, and I didn't think there was one here. I never heard him. The windows were closed, and they were open. And I went to school, and I forgot, because you're a child, and that's the truth of the story. And it's, by the way, it's a picture book that will be out next fall or the following spring with Raúl Colón. And if you don't know Raúl Colón, he was a New Yorker Illustrator of the Year. He's extraordinary. He's from Puerto Rico, for which we've forgiven him, but his wife is from Cuba, and so he's redeemed himself somewhat.
Oh, and his artwork is gorgeous. Yes.
So yeah, but the story is actually 45 minutes long, because what I didn't today was the whole first day of school, going on the playground, making friends, and y'all didn't get to meet. I'm very sorry you didn't get to meet my friend in this, who was a little Southern boy. It's okay, another day.
She told me the other day that she really wanted to make it to Eudora Welty tour, the house tour, yesterday. And because she's a Southerner. Because, she is. She's from Cuba, but you've been here a lot longer.
I'll be 63 in the fall. And I am inexorably proud, as you hopefully can tell, of my country of origin and the place where, as Isak Dinesen would say in her book Out of Africa and her other books, where I cast my first shadow. What language, right? But I also came to love the South and its people and the people who took us in. And of course, I'm asked lots of questions by children and by adults. Good questions, hard questions. I like those. We need to welcome questions. We need to ask and listen to answers. That's how we learn about each other. And did I experience racism? Of course I did. Did I experience great kindness at the hands of many Southerners? Yes, I did. And I chose my own path.
So, have you got another one?
Oh,
or not?
Of course. I could do a little short one. Are there any teachers here?
What a question.
So that one's actually a hard story to tell, even now. My father's gone. He died 6 years ago at 93. At the venerable age of 93. My mother is 92 and she's on hospice. So I still love telling their stories. It's harder to tell them. So let me tell this 5-minute story. This is for those of you who, do any of you dream secretly? Don't turn around and look at anybody so that they can raise their hands in somewhat incognito. You don't even know I'm gonna ask you, child. But you're cute, so you get a pass. Any of you dream of writing? Writing children's books, maybe? For children? Okay. So one of the things that inevitably comes up in an interview is, why children? I mean, I have written a chapter book that had a great literary reception and is really great up in Europe, but it's barely known here. The Cheshire Cheese Cat. It's had like 4-star reviews, and it's in England and France, but barely anyone knows it here. I loved working on that, but why? Why write stories? Most of my stories are for younger kids. I like them. If you don't like them, for the love of God, do something else, right? And I want to tell you in one short story, one of the primary reasons I love the stinky ones, the rotten ones, and there are some of you, and I love you. They're the ones that say, I hate that story. I mean, they'll look you they'll look you in the face after you just literally you gutted yourself to tell them the best story you had. Hate that story. Okay, well, maybe I have another one. I hope it's better than the last one you told. So, this is called Billy. I was on my way to what's called RISA, which is the heart of Georgia. It's heart of Georgia, RISA. I was to visit several schools, and one of the schools, the one I was going to that particular morning, had a young authors conference in the dead of summer. It was a way to keep children connected with school. And I arrived, I had been to this school in the past as a visiting author, and I pulled up under a live oak because I knew that car was going to be like, just sweltering when I got in it. Later that afternoon, I walked inside. I went to the office. I checked in with the person who runs the school, which if anyone here works with the school systems, is the secretary. She was a woman she was of considerable size. She was stout and wonderful and solid. And she gave me one look and said, "I need your license and a drop of blood." And she was joking, y'all. Okay. I already loved this woman. I said, "Oh, you're new here." She said, "So are you." And I knew what she meant. I handed my license. We start laughing. We talked for a little while, and I said, "So where are the children?" She said, "Well, they have a little surprise for you this morning." I said, "They do?" "Well, yeah, it's down the hall. The library. You can hear them from here." And she said, "Good luck." And she leaned in, and her bosoms were like slow-moving lava. They just sort of rolled over that desk. And that was for you, not for them. And I said, "All right, well, keep the door open in case I need to come running back." Something about the way she said it made me think there might have been a problem. Well, 4th and 5th graders, I don't care. I go to the Bronx. I don't care. I love this age. I love the high schoolers. As I go down the hall, both walls are full of children's artwork, which to me is like going to the Louvre. And the doors were open, propped together with little pieces of wood, little wedges of wood. And then I saw them. Just a glimpse. The floor was carpeted with them. It's like looking, if you're an angler, my dad and I used to fish together, you look into like an old tomato can full of wriggling worms. It's kind of like that. And they carpeted the floor. Preschoolers. All preschoolers. I was supposed to see 4th and 5th graders. 4th and 5th graders, you guys. And only if you understand developmental ages a little bit, but you can figure it out, even if you're not in education, that this is really a big shift. And I got to the door, and here comes this woman because she can only move along the wall. And by the way, teachers are everywhere. They have covered the perimeter. Thank you. See, you've been there in the trenches. And the children are in the middle, and you think anything could happen here, anything. And they're doing what preschoolers do. They're sucking their hair. They're sucking somebody else's hair. They're licking the baseboards. They're gnawing at their nails. They have their fingers up their noses. And this woman, I know she's a librarian. She's got this lime green dress and real Crayola necklace, like real Crayola crayons that she's made out of a necklace, or somebody made for her. Her hair is bobbed. She's got fabulous glasses. And when she gets to me, she looks just a mite panicked. She said, "There's been a change. I can see that. What are you trying to do to me, Betty?" Because I knew her. She said, "I'm so sorry. Administration." And we both went, "Oh." And she said, "You better do something fast. Just tell them a story. Just tell them a story." I said, "Okay." Because she knew and I knew that story saves everything. It's human connective tissue, whether the human is 4 or 100. Well, I make my way. She goes, "Your chair's over there." And I could have killed her. Again, I'm going along the wall, and the chair is one of those old director's chairs. It's old woman entrapment. It'll seize up on you like a pocketbook, which it did to the great amusement of the children, the only plus being that I now had them on my side. They were waiting to see what else I was going to do or fall out of. And then I began, because I knew if I would just start, the story would do its good work. Long ago in an ancient wood by the sea, you wouldn't imagine a wood by the sea, but you wouldn't have been this particular creature. It starts to wash out. And what it does is the children that are doing this, one by one, they'll start this. They look like prairie dogs. And then they'll do, except for one kid. Because if there are teachers, are there teachers in here? There's always one kid. I think they give them to you. Like they find it and they go, "Oh, let's give Mrs. Nelson this one." All right. He's right in front of me. And he looks like a little man, just so you have a pencil sketch of him. His hair has been slicked down. I swear to you, it's like my dad used to, Brill Cream, Little Dabble, do you? Okay, it's slicked down, parted on the side, and he's got this little shirt. It's plaid, it's buttoned up to the top. He's wearing a belt, you guys. And he's doing this while I'm talking. And he looks at me and then he starts muttering to himself. And I'm trying to stay in the story that I'm trying to tell. But you can hear him. He starts, you know how they do this all like little... I think, what in the... I thought, all right, get through this story. Get on the other side. And I start hacking off scenes. I'm dropping characters left and right. I just think, get to the end. And we got to the end. I said, and they all lived well into their happy old age. And they're pre-K and kinder. There might have been some kinder. But they're mostly pre-K. They all clapped because I could have read the phone book. They didn't care. You know, yay! I think, oh, thank goodness. And then somebody in the back of the room, and I'm telling y'all, we never sussed her out. But I think it was one of those 4th or 5th grade teachers who was bitter. Calls out, do any of the children have a question for the author? Thank you. You can explain to them what that means? See, they're lost. Pre-K does not do inquiry. They do declarative statement. I got a puppy. My daddy slept in the pickup last night because my mom... All right, this is what you're going to get. All these little hands came flying up. But in front of me, somebody's not just doing that. Somebody is at a rock concert. Billy. I would learn his name. Little Billy's in front of me. He's, lady, hey, lady. And I think, should I? Well, could be fun, but could be bad. Lady, and now from the other end of the room I hear, Billy, no. And I know this has to be Billy's teacher. Nobody else could conjure up that level of panic. And I look at him and he says, lady, and she says, Billy, no. And then she starts to like make her way through that ocean of children playing whack-a-mole with those prairie dogs. And when she finally... I don't know where that came from. And she finally nearly reaches Billy. I look at her and her eyes lock, and it's that moment, you know, where two people who work in a certain field kind of communicate almost, you know, just tacitly. And I can hear her saying, you don't want to do this. And I thought she could hear me saying, don't worry, I'm a professional. And I turned to Billy and said, what is it, honey? And she just... Lady, he said, and he stands up now to speak. How do you go from looking like that, and he points to a poster of me from 1995, a Reed poster that's hanging in there, to looking like that? Billy, no! That woman became a gazelle. She leapt over the last 4 or 5 children, picked up Billy. He is still wailing. He's like a chimera, arms and legs everywhere. They're on the way out the door, and that child is absolutely unquenchable, unsinkable. And he says, so how do ya? And I just believe any child that commits so thoroughly to inquiry deserves an answer, right? So I said, it's called oldness, Billy. And he says, my teacher's got that time. They were gone. It was one of the most ridiculous and wonderful moments of my author travel in life. But it was later, as the story comes to a close now, that I would seek out Billy's teacher because you knew there was more story there. Billy had a story, all of which really I can't really share here other than to tell you, even though you don't know him, it feels wrong. His father was in prison. His mother was overwhelmed with home and too many children and several jobs. And this teacher had decided that Billy was the reason she went into education. Billy was her one child. Because when we do this work, it can feel absolutely hopeless at times. We can wonder why we do it. And teachers who are in the trenches, unlike people like me who go in and rabble-rouse and leave, they're falling out left and right. They just can't do it. But here's the thing. The world is on fire. Could we not lie about that? We can't put out the fire, but we can run into one house and pull out one person. That is what we can do. And with that, you can sleep at night. Right? She was a remarkable woman. By the way, this happened before the pandemic, and every so often she'll send me an email. I haven't heard from her since spring. Billy's doing really great. He's doing really well, I shouldn't say. So there's Billy.
So, is there anybody who would like to ask a question? Or just say something, be a Billy to Carmen or for Carmen. And really, I think we need this because the questions, well, I can repeat them.
And I can close with a 3-minute story.
And if there is no, but I know you guys have questions because I see teachers, I see people in here who will want to tap her. Yes, sir.
I don't have a question, but as one who knows and loves the power of story, I am thoroughly enchanted. Thank you.
Yes.
For those of you who couldn't be where I'm at, watching Ellen's face was pretty monumental.
I don't even know how to take that. On the edge? Yeah. Yeah, she does that. And the thing is, what you don't know is she walked in and looked at this setup and said, oh no, I need to be, standing up and moving and...
No, not moving, just standing.
Standing.
Yeah.
But you move even when you're sitting.
But I'm not. That's the thing. Think about it. Do you know that I barely
Carmen,
moved?
this is moving.
No, this is, no. Americana. my beloved American friend, this is not moving. This is gesture. This is moving. But when you tell a story, if you're in it, it will feel like the story is everywhere, right? I've had, case in point, another kid, the stuff they say to us, Lord have mercy. I had finished a story, and there was a wild ride through it, all right? It was a horseback ride, it was a race. He said, I am worn out. She was over there, and then she was over here, and then I never moved. But that is the most wonderful thing to say. But by the way, about Ellen's face, Ellen is what every storyteller dreams of, and she tells a killer story, by the way, because she's an innate storyteller. But she is an amazing story listener. But the reason that I think that we all sort of created that community, and this is not false modesty. I have worked very hard at what I do. I still have bad days. This is a craft. A craft is like throwing clay, okay, and working it. You make lots of bad pots, and you will still again, even when you think you've gained that much mastery. But I've been doing it for 32 years. What I found is that sometimes the dented pot is the most interesting. And whereas maybe 10 or 15 years ago, you might have heard me tell a story that may have felt almost seamless, it was not nearly as human as the stories that I tell now. Because as I've grown older, I have embraced the brokenness in me, in you. It's Cohen, it's how the light gets in, it's true. And story is our friend. We've always told them from the first cave drawings, when we couldn't speak, when we were illiterate. My father was illiterate till he was 14, and when I interviewed him, one of the things he said on that tape, do not think that because I did not read, I did not have an entire universe inside of me. And when I go to very poor communities, from very rural to very urban, many of the children whom I connect with the most, the ones who don't want to leave, teachers will say, this kid can't even read, they don't do their work. I said, no, but they're human. And this is the most human thing about us. And story is human connective tissue. I take a thread over there to you, sir. thank you. And you throw it to her, and you throw it back to me, and then to Ellen, and then he throws it to you. And doesn't this room feel smaller and not so big and empty anymore? Tag, you're it.
There, that was amazing right there. Any other comments? Yes.
I just have to thank you for your stories on all your books. I pulled out my Agatha's Featherbed, The Library Dragon, and The Last Dance this morning that you autographed when you came to my school.
Oh!
I remember you being at our house. And she had long hair. And you actually were not fit. You came to our school in Armorell, Arkansas.
Yes.
And then again, you came to a school where I taught in West Memphis, Arkansas. And she was in kindergarten. And I brought my 2-year-old to this.
Oh, the next generation.
Yes, but I retired like 5 years ago, and I have not been so excited since I retired because I miss my storytelling. And, I miss the books. But thank you so much for all of your books and all of your stories.
Thank you for that.
That's wonderful.
Oh, that's very
Thank
kind.
you.
Thank you.
Another story. I mean, that's a wonderful story.
Oh, these big strapping kids come up to me now and they're like, "You told me stories when I was 4. I did not, I never did. It's wonderful.
One thing, Carmen will be at the picture book panel this afternoon, and she'll be at the book signing. I can't remember what time.
After this.
But I wanted you to just see the cover of the book without, isn't that cool? So it's
Show
really,
them the inside of the jacket. The illustrator is Brian Lees. He's a Caldecott honor
and
winner.
the
and he's
inside,
amazing.
I meant to show you this too. This is really becoming very fashionable in picture books, and I love it. The way they are creating all
Well, it
of
becomes an artifact in a
Yeah.
way, and it's curated I guess it's a good way to putting
Yeah.
it. And I love those books, and children love them because they manipulate them, and I started out teaching Montessori, so I love manipulatives.
Yes.
Touchy, pokey, pokey.
I teach first grade.
Bless you.
Your book, 14 Cows for America, is what I share with my students because it's such a difficult
Yes.
conversation to have. But that offers so much hope, and I just thank you for that.
I think what happened was so extraordinary. I'm glad that the book had that impact, and the book did really well. It was a New York Times bestseller. I mean, it did really, really well, but the fact is that it was the story. See, it was the story that resonated. Here was September 11th, okay, so it was April of the following year, and splashed across the front of the New York Times was this article. And there were women, Maasai women, which I was familiar with from literature, but they had beautiful red tunics, but they were holding this sign and said something very cryptic. "We give these cows to help you, September 11, tragedy, America." And I thought, what? The Maasai were cattle raiders because they believed, it was part of their faith, it is still, that the cows of the world were theirs to tend. And it's also, good reason to take more cattle, I suppose, and they'll tell you that as a joke now, but mostly now what they do is they're still nomadic, and this particular tribe still lives on the Mara Reserve in Kenya, and when I read this story, I saved it, as many writers do. I didn't do anything with it because no one I knew was creating from the ashes of that nightmare. Not musicians, not writers, not filmmakers. But people did save things. We see them. That's what you do. You save them. You tuck them away. You look at them at some other time. And eventually, to make this brief then, I was able, through the New York Times and through the bureau chief who wrote the original story, but he was now bureau chief in Mexico. And it took months to find him. And he was able, and then eventually find Kimeli, the young man who was interviewed about this, who was the reason all this happened. It happened because he was in New York when the towers fell. He was a Maasai from that tribe who was studying at Stanford, They had taken a trip to New York and were there on September 11th. And when the towers fell, as he said, he was very soft-spoken. And he said, Carmen, I am a warrior. He had already been through the initiations. When everyone was running away, I saw who was running to the trouble. The fire and rescue, the police officers. He said, and I knew which direction I had to run. And he said when he finally got there, he just couldn't see. I mean, it was just such a cloud of everything. He said, but there was no one left to save and nothing left to do. Well, there was a lot left to do. But he was right in there was virtually, I think there were 1 or 2 people, but virtually no one left to save. So what happens in April, he goes to his tribe. He tells them what happened, what he saw, but he tells them like as a story. He talks about buildings so tall they touch the clouds, fires so hot they melt iron. And when the elders of his tribe hear the story, the tribe collectively, beginning with Kameli, decided that they wanted to give something to us. They are the first nation to respond to us after that tragedy. And in the book, it ends with, because no nation is so big it cannot be wounded, nor any people so small they cannot offer mighty comfort. And to me, that is the story. So what happens during terrible times? Do you know that's when balladeering happened, right? That's when all these odes are written. We call on the artists to make sense of the insensible. Sometimes it doesn't happen for years. I don't feel like I have any grand calling for that. And I'm being honest, my one gift is that I was born, the gift was the gift of birth to people who loved stories, Cubanos, and then incubated among people who loved stories, Southerners. Such a strange Southern Gothic kind of weird thing. And so that's, my life has been to write stories, but to tell them. And I thank you today for listening, for being here. But if you leave with nothing else, please go and talk. Talk to each other as you walk out. You guys have me off the cliff, and I don't know why, but I'm just...
Thank you both so much. Let's give another wonderful round of applause for both Carmen Agra Deedy and Ellen Ruffin.
Thank y'all. Thank you so much for being a great audience.